Okay, thank you everyone for joining. I'm Seth Bringman, Director of Strategic Communications for Fair Fight. Welcome to the Georgia Battleground call, State of the Race, with Leader Stacey Abrams. Leader, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining this call today. Before we begin, though, I want to share my thoughts on the news out of Louisville yesterday. My prayers are with the family and the loved ones of Breonna Taylor. Her loss remains immeasurable, but more importantly, the lack of access to justice remains deeply disturbing. We live in a nation of laws and a nation that works best when everyone is held accountable. And the lack of accountability, the lack of justice provided to Breonna and to provide it to her family should be of great concern to all of us. We know that there are steps that continue to need to be taken, but more importantly, we need to demand of our leaders accountability and responsibility. We know that Breonna deserves justice, but the system that's perpetuating this injustice is a derelict in its duty. And so we have to build a new system with new voices and new votes. Voting will not solve everything, but we know that in a system of laws, in a democracy, the right to vote and the ability to select our leaders is how we make change. And so I will continue the work of pushing for every person to make their voices heard, but more importantly, pushing for justice so that the family of Breonna Taylor, the people of Louisville, the people of this country can believe once again in justice for all. Here in Georgia, we have faced our own litany of challenges and changes, and we are on the cusp of change in our state. Georgia is a battleground, and this isn't simply wishful thinking. It has been proven time and again, beginning with the great change that has happened over the last few years. We know that in 2012, President Barack Obama lost the state of Georgia by 8 points. In 2016, Secretary Clinton lost it by 5 points. And in 2018, the margin of difference between myself and Brian Kemp was 1.4%. But since that time, a record 800,000 new voters have registered and been added to the rolls in Georgia. Those registration numbers have very important data behind them. 45% of those new registrants are under the age of 30. 49% of them are people of color. And when you look at those two groups, those are disproportionately likely to be Democratic voters, and they are not alone. We have seen shifts among white voters in the state of Georgia moving in the direction of Democrats for the first time in a generation, and that movement is not stopping. And because of Joe Biden, because his presidential campaign has decided to make a significant investment in the state of Georgia, we believe that those numbers will continue to move in our direction. But don't just take my word for it. The AJC recently did a poll that shows this is a dead heat, 47-47. And just this morning, the New York Times reported 45-45. No matter what numbers you're looking at, no matter what polls you're looking at, the story remains the same. This is a dead heat. And in the state of Georgia, a dead heat actually tends towards Democrats. We know that we are on the cusp of delivering 16 electoral votes for the presidency. But not only that, we have 2 Senate seats that are hyper competitive. We have 2 congressional races where we will hold the 6th and take the 7th. And we have the ability to flip 16 seats in the Georgia House of Representatives. And these are all on the table because Georgia is moving in the right direction. I want to take a moment and talk about our candidates. Jon Ossoff is putting in the work, and we see David Perdue sweating. David Perdue cannot account for his behavior over the last 6 years, and he cannot show his work. Jon Ossoff has put a lot of pressure on David Perdue, and we are seeing the results in poll after poll showing that Jon Ossoff is not only tied neck and neck, but in some polls is ahead. And for Raphael Warnock, we know that he has the ability to win this election, to at least make it into the runoff, and we have seen his numbers skyrocket in the last few weeks. He is running against one of the weakest Republican incumbents in the country, in Kelly Loeffler, someone who is so desperate that she compared herself to Attila the Hun. And we know that as the numbers continue to rise, as support consolidates around Raphael Warnock, we know that his numbers will only continue to climb. And right now he's either second or third, but we know that by the time we get to election day, he is going to be positioned to be in first, and our hope is that he will be positioned for victory. Lucy McBath and Karen Handel are in a redo, and once again, Lucy McBath is showing why she is the Congresswoman from the 6th Congressional District. We have no doubt that Lucy will continue to do the work of speaking out to a diverse and committed community that wants to see her continue to serve them in Congress. And she will be joined by Carolyn Bordeaux in the 7th. That is a seat that was narrowly lost in 2018 by fewer than 400 votes. And we believe that we have found those votes and added to them exponentially. But let's talk about the numbers. Let's talk about where we are in terms of actual voting, because early voting has started in Georgia through vote by mail, and in-person early voting will start on October 12th. So let's look at where we are today. 1.2 million absentee ballots have been requested in the state of Georgia, 61% of them from Democrats. 1/3 of those ballots are being requested by African-American voters. This is huge because in 2016, only 26% of Black voters requested absentee ballots. In 2020, that's 33%. That makes Georgia the battleground state that has the single highest percentage of Black voters. The next closest is North Carolina with 22%. But let's go deeper into the numbers. We know that of those voters who are requesting ballots, 1 out of 4 Black voters requesting a ballot right now did not vote in 2016. 46% of Hispanic voters that are requesting a ballot did not vote in 2016. 50% of AAPI voters requesting a ballot in 2020 did not vote in 2016, and 65% of voters under the age of 30 requesting ballots did not vote in 2016. If you look at the 2018 race, we know every single one of those populations strongly leans Democratic. In our election where we had record turnout for Democrats, we outperformed in every single one of those categories, and these numbers threaten to dwarf what we accomplished with our record Democratic turnout. We know that Georgia is a battleground state. We know that Georgia is poised for victory, and we know that that victory will come because we have been doing the work. The work done in 2018 to encourage and educate voters about their options in Georgia. The work done by Fair Fight to ensure that people have access to the right to vote in Georgia. The work done by organizations across the state to hold the Secretary of State accountable. These are the ways we will come together and deliver victory for Georgia Democrats in 2020. And so I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Leader. We'll take questions soon. I wanted to actually go into some graphics that demonstrate what Leader Abrams discussed. So I will start with a graphic that shows over time the voters of color increasing their power in Georgia. If you look at 2002, less than 25% of the electorate was voters of color. Up to 2018 and continuing, we're seeing 40%. You also see that swing reflected in the elections. As Leader Abrams said, in 2012, Obama -8, 2016, Clinton -5, 2018, Abrams -1.4, and the trend will continue. And then the last graph that I will share is one that shows 3 particular counties where the change is happening the fastest in the state. Actually, in 2016, there were only 6 counties in the United States that had voted for Mitt Romney in 2012 and then for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Only 6 counties, and 3 of them were here in Georgia for the whole country. Those counties are Gwinnett County, Cobb County, and Henry County. And one of the reasons why we're so confident about the 6th and 7th congressional districts is because Cobb and Gwinnett make up much of those. But these 3 counties have contributed to the changes that you've seen in Georgia and the changes that you will continue to see this November. So with that, we will be happy to take questions. The way that you request to ask a question is by clicking participants at the bottom of your screen. If you click participants, you will then see the list of participants to your right, and that will give you the option to raise your hand. Click participants at the bottom and then raise your hand at the bottom left. Our first question will be from Greg from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Greg, you are unmuted.
Hi, Ms. Abrams, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. I got two for you, but I hope these are helpful to everyone listening. First, President Trump is visiting Georgia tomorrow, as you know, and you mentioned, to try to appeal to Black voters. I'd love to hear your message for him. And secondly, there are new calls for Matt Lieberman to drop out of the race to clear the way for Reverend Warnock, who's now the front runner in every poll we've seen. Do you share those concerns?
So with regards to the visit of President Trump, I think it's a fool's errand. We know that his failure in leadership, his failure on COVID, his failure on racial justice, his failure on the economy means that he will not be adding votes to his column here in the state of Georgia. But what's more concerning to me is his absolute denial of his responsibility. And what I hope he takes away from the state of Georgia tomorrow is that he's no longer welcome here. He's certainly not going to add votes to his column by coming here and trying to pander without delivering any actual results and without being able to explain his incompetence and worse, his just immorality when it comes to thinking about how to lead the whole country. With regards to Matt Lieberman, I've been deeply disturbed by the information that has come out about not only his book, but some of his comments. I think Matt may be a good person, but he is not the right candidate. And I do believe that the best result for all is for Matt to step back and to recognize that Raphael Warnock is the leader we need for the state of Georgia. His moral vision, his proven engagement in our community, his strong campaign, all signal that he is the person that we need to stand up to defeat Kelly Loeffler and to represent the state of Georgia. And I would just encourage Matt to search his conscience and to understand why he is running. And if his goal is to make certain that Georgia has the senators we need to defeat Mitch McConnell, to defeat the attempt to take the Supreme Court, if we want a real leader, we need Matt Lieberman to understand that he is not called for this moment and to step back and to let support consolidate around Raphael Warnock so he can lead the voters of Georgia and lead the state of Georgia.
Thank you.
Seth, can anybody hear me? This
Yes.
is Joanne. Oh, okay. Hello, Miss Abrams. How are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Not too bad. This is Joanne Merrigan and Savannah. I just wanted to kind of, I guess, build on Greg's question. Would you extend that invitation to drop out to Mr. Tarver as well? In the sense that I think there's some, certainly some speculation that the fewer Democrats that were in the race would help help the Reverend Warnock even more.
At this point, dropping out of the race is not actually a possibility. Every name is going to appear on the ballot. What we're asking is for people to consolidate their support around Raphael Warnock. I served with Ed Tarver. I think he is a good man, but he also has no pathway to victory. And at this moment, this is one of those few times where we do need all hands on deck. We do need everyone to consolidate. There are 21 candidates on that ballot, and name recognition is going to be a big part of it. Raphael Warnock has made dramatic strides in increasing his name recognition and his name ID. He has also done an extraordinary job of meeting voters, reaching out and letting them know what's possible and what's at stake. And so I would certainly call on Ed Tarver and Matt Lieberman to join the support that's consolidating around the person we know can win this election. We are 40 days out from this campaign, and we need every person who wants to see Democrats win to stand behind the person who is the most likely to be that victor, and that is Raphael Warnock.
Our next question will come from Vanessa from the Washington Post. Vanessa, your line is unmuted.
Good morning, Leader Abrams. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good morning.
Two quick questions. One, given all of the confusing information that is being tossed around about absentee ballots, how confident are you? What's being done to reassure people that that is a safe way to vote, that they don't have to worry about their vote not being counted? And my second question would be, what do you need, you as in Georgia Democrats, need from the Biden campaign? Are you getting what you need? Are you getting the attention you need, the support you need? If not, what else do they need to do? Thank you very much.
Absolutely. From the beginning, what I've said, and I will continue to say, is that the mission is to vote early. And the best way to vote early for many Americans, particularly for many Georgians, is to vote by mail. We have done deep work to encourage vote by mail across this country, but more importantly, there have been a coalition of organizations that have done the work to make it easier to vote by mail across this country. Let's remember, in January of 2020, there were only 34 states that allowed no excuses absentee balloting. As of today, there are only 5 states that will not permit absentee balloting without an excuse, because we have an additional set of states that have allowed voting by mail with COVID as the excuse. That is a dramatic increase in the number of states that are making it easier to vote by mail, but also making it more accessible to vote by mail. But we know that in 41 states, you can also vote in person early. And we are strongly encouraging people to use that apparatus if they so choose. We know in states like Georgia, where we faced 8-hour lines, people are necessarily concerned that the ability to go and vote in person may be harder because they aren't certain that the Secretary of State has fixed the problems that left people in line and left them susceptible to COVID because of the sheer volume of people who are going to be in line. But we have seen people step up, from organizations across this country to the NBA opening arenas. So we know that there are going to be more places for people to vote. We know that through Power the Polls, we are seeing more young people step up to be poll workers. These are good things that will help make certain that the entire process works. But no, I'm not concerned about voting by mail. There are still some states where we see challenges, but you also see that we know about those challenges because there's litigation to try to fix it. There's also education. We are in a much better position in 2020 than we were in 2018, where very few Americans really understood what vote by mail could mean. And so I continue to say the goal is to vote early, vote by mail if you can. If you can't, vote early in person if you're permitted. And no matter what, make certain you show up by last call, which is election day. But the mission is to cast our votes early, to make certain that we have a backup plan and a backup to that backup plan so that every vote can be cast and every vote can be counted. With regard to Georgia, we are actually quite excited about the investment that we are seeing from the Biden campaign. Their announcement earlier this week that they were expanding their investment to include Georgia and Iowa is a reflection of not only those numbers I recited, but of the position of our candidates. In Iowa, Teresa Greenfield is ahead of Joni Ernst in a number of polls. And here in Georgia, we have the duo of John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, who are making this a very pitched battle. And because of the joint investment that's coming not only from the Biden campaign, but from the DSCC and the strong performance of our candidates on their own, we know that these are competitive races. My ask is simply that we continue to see the commitment from the Biden campaign, and I have no reason to doubt that they will continue to do so.
Our next question will come from Doug Richards from 11 Alive.
Hey, good morning, Leader Abrams.
Good morning.
So there have been anecdotal stories about voters getting removed from the voter rolls for various causes, like the registrars thought that they were dead or whatever. And similarly, there have been a lot of polling places that have been changed this year because of COVID. We have not heard a lot of the sort of widespread voter suppression stories that we heard in 2018 this year. Do you have a message for folks who might be complacent about, who might think that they're supposed to vote in the same place that they voted in 2018, or maybe haven't checked just to see if they're still registered and that sort of thing?
We have been hard at work making certain since 2018 that there is a constant drumbeat that says that the best antidote to voter suppression here in Georgia is voter education, voter engagement, and voter turnout. Fair Fight has been doing this work across the state. We recently saw Fair Fight U students at UGA fighting to reopen a polling place on campus. And we've been parts of conversations around the state, making certain that when polling places change, that those changes make sense and that they don't disadvantage voters. But the reality is that voter suppression it's not simply about one piece. It is about whether you can register and stay on the rolls, if you can cast your ballot, and if your ballot can be counted. And unfortunately, the dismal performance we saw from the Secretary of State in June after 2 tries demonstrates that we cannot be complacent. And so we will continue to keep attention. We will continue to stay in the courts. Not just Fair Fight, but other organizations have been fighting to expand access to the right to vote for eligible voters, including the recent decision that says that if we return absentee ballots postmarked by Election Day, if they get there up to 3 days later, they will count. Those are important things. We had a consent order that now requires the state to actually notify you through your local county elections officials if there are challenges with your mail-in ballot, so you have a chance to cure them. These are important steps forward, but we don't take anything for granted and we are not complacent. We are doing the work of reaching out. In fact, we recently had a day of action where 1.1 million text and phone calls were made, including 100,000 over a single weekend. We're doing this in Georgia and around the country because while we are seeing progress, we know that progress isn't permanent and that voter suppression is going to rear its head in the state of Georgia as it will across the country because the Republicans have told us that's one of their plans. And so we're going to stay vigilant. We're going to stay hard at work, but we are very pleased that voters have a better understanding of what their opportunities are. That's why we encourage them to go to peachvote.com to apply for their absentee ballot. If they have any questions, they can go to vote.org or call 866-OUR-VOTE to get information on how to make certain their vote counts this year in the state of Georgia and around the country.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question will come from Quinn from ABC.
Hi, Leader Abrams. Thanks for taking my question. I'm hoping you can respond to the president's comments last night suggesting he might not accept a peaceful transition of power should he lose the election. And then additionally, on that lawsuit that was just being talked about the postmark deadline being moved, did you interpret that ruling to apply statewide now that Republicans in the state are alleging that it only applies to 17 specific counties?
So I'll start with the second part first. We believe that it's a statewide rule, and we will remain in court to ensure that the entire state of Georgia is held to the same standard of democracy. The reality is Georgia has one of the largest rural areas in the country. We face challenges with postal delivery in urban areas, and so there is no reason to cherry pick which counties in the state of Georgia have access to the right to vote by mail. This ruling should apply statewide, and it is our very strong contention that that is what the courts will decide. When it comes to President Trump's latest attempt at distraction, we have to stop paying attention to the chaos and pay attention to the work that's behind it. This is much like someone throwing a firebomb, so everyone's attention focuses on it while they're in the back doing whatever nefarious thing they want to do. I don't worry about whether or not Donald Trump will agree to a peaceful transfer of power. What I worry about is why he's trying to rile up our tensions and inflame our passions, because he's trying to hide from his failure to save 200,000 lives in our country, where nearly 7 million people are being infected by a disease. And we know that if he had shown even the slightest inkling of leadership, we could have saved at least 145,000 lives. We know that Donald Trump does not know how to lead, but he knows how to distract. And my strong urging to both Americans and to our media in America is please don't fall for it. He is like a second-rate magician who says, watch what's happening here while he tries to do something on the other side. And right now that has been his attempt to invalidate voting by mail for most Americans, trying to unfortunately cheat the 2020 census by artificially ending it and delivering false data in December. We know he is trying to use these arguments to hide his incompetence, but also to hide his malfeasance as he attempts to dismantle what makes our democracy work in this country.
Thank you.
Our next question will come from Stephen Fowler from Georgia Public Broadcasting.
Hi, Leader Abrams. Two-part question for you. One, with 1.2 million absentee ballots already being requested in Georgia, what kind of efforts is Fair Fight undertaking to increase that number and to get people, like they did in 2018, to turn out and vote absentee? And then second, we're 40 days out. There's a lot of dis and misinformation about absentee voting and voting in general floating already. And so how do you think is the best way to combat that, to help people understand the accurate and safe way to vote instead of falling for some sort of shenanigans?
Absolutely. The best antidote to misinformation is good information. And Fair Fight is proud to be in coalition with dozens of organizations across the state and around the country that are putting out good information. And we see that it's working because we've seen a record number of Georgia voters ask for absentee ballots, including those voters that are usually the likely targets of misinformation. That's communities of color. We know that in Georgia, you are twice as likely to have your absentee ballot rejected if you're Black or Latino, 5 times more likely if you are a young person. And yet we have seen marked increases among all of these communities requesting those ballots because they're getting good information. But our best efforts are to make certain that people know all of the options in the state of Georgia. In theory, Georgia has great laws. We have the opportunity to vote absentee. We have early voting starting on October 12th with a mandatory Saturday, and of course, Election Day. So the responsibility of Fair Fight and other organizations is to ensure that people have this information. It's going out on social media, it's going out by mail. Candidates are sharing this information. And so I believe that we are doing a very effective job of combating misinformation, but we also rely on reporters like yourselves who are telling people the truth and allowing them to have the good information that overwhelms the misinformation. And let's be clear, the lies that are being told about what's available and what's at stake. For the purposes of our political side of Fair Fight, we have been working hand in hand, supporting candidates who are doing the right thing. That's why we are staunchly behind John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, behind Lucy McBath and Carolyn Bordeaux, but it's also why we are very strongly supporting the Legislative Victory Fund to flip those seats in the state house so that we know heading into 2021, Democrats will have a seat at the table for redistricting. We are investing at every level of the state of Georgia. We are investing in campaigns, but we're also investing in outreach to voters because, to your point, the best way to win this election for America, the best way for democracy to work is for people to have good information, for us to dispel bad information and immediately replace it with repeatable good information. And that is make a plan to vote early and use all of the options available. If you have questions, go to peachvote.com to sign up for your absentee ballot and to find out more about how we can win in the state of Georgia.
Okay, and we will have time for one more question. I do see a couple of hands still up. Please go ahead if you raised your hand and didn't get to ask a question, or if you do have a question after the call, please email us at press@fairfightaction.com and we'll be happy to get you the information you need. That's press@fairfightaction.com. So our last question will come from Emil Moffitt from WABE.
Hi, Ms. Abrams. What's been your assessment of Georgia's election preparation, both at the county and the state level, since the June primaries?
I think the counties have done the best they can with the resources they have. I, of course, will hold the Republican Senate accountable for refusing to pass the HEROES Act, which would have deployed millions in resources to the state of Georgia to shore up their efforts. I am cautiously optimistic that the pledge made by the Secretary of State that he would actually do his job this time, that he would make certain that there are technicians to man the machines, that he will ensure that absentee ballots actually get sent out, that he will help our counties do their jobs, which is his job, that he will actually do the job of resourcing our local officials and supporting their efforts. He pledged that he would do so at his press conference a few months ago, and my hope is that he will follow through. Unfortunately, we see him in court battling to stop voters from being counted in their votes when they vote absentee because the post office may delay their mail. And so he continues to cause great concern. But overall, I think the counties are doing the best they can with the resources they have under extreme conditions. And my hope is that the Secretary of State will stop making false accusations about voters and will stop trying to scare people out of voting and will instead focus all of his attention on ensuring that every eligible Georgian can cast a ballot and have that vote counted.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us this morning, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you guys. Take care.